The podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger. Fun show for us. It is Jeff Sintel on the road, assisted by AAA. A little later on, we'll get into all the UGA recruiting news coming up with Jeff. We'll have some recruiting stuff off the top of today's program there as well. There's an interesting, at least I think it's interesting, hopefully you'll think it's interesting as well, point I want to make about JT Daniels on today's show and what's at least a possibility. Examples every day of the world heading back to normal just in time for college football coming up later on this fall. All of that to be discussed. It is all on the way next. DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Kroger, begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Kroger, fresh for everyone.
Is ahead of the 2017 National Signing Day. Back then, we only had one National Signing Day. It was in February, and I remember when now former Georgia running back DeAndre Swift announced his commitment video. And to me, back there in that kind of like 2017 era, 2016, 2017, that era, a few years ago, that to me seems like back DeAndre Swift did his with Bleacher Report, if I remember this correctly, and it was kind of like the sort of recreation of the moment from Rocky, where you're running through the streets of Philadelphia. After all, the city of brotherly love was DeAndre Swift's hometown, and it's kind of a recreation of that for his commitment video. Stuff like that works on me. Obviously, I grew up loving the Rocky movies. I'm too old to have seen outside the old Spectrum where the Rocky statue, I think it's still there. I know it was the last time I was there. The Rocky statue, and you get your picture taken in front of that. I just kind of always liked that. And I thought it was really cool that starting with DeAndre Swift, and of course including his cousin Mark Webb there in the class of 2017, Georgia had this connection to the city of Philadelphia. And that was kind of a really cool thing to see. And it was Webb and Swift seem to still have in their city of Philadelphia, their school, UGA. Boy, it really seems to really live on. We've heard Swift talking about that. And a couple of weeks ago on this show, DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger, when Mark Webb was on the show with us, we had a chance to ask him about another guy that follows the same path. Felt about seeing someone travel that similar path, and it was really cool to hear on the show. Webb, the Philly native, UGA player, now ex-UGA player on his way to the NFL, the pride that he had, that the spot that he occupied on the field for Georgia these last couple of years would now be potentially occupied by someone else who calls the same. Enjoyed it as well. Here's a reminder.
Oh, yeah, I know Tykee very well. That's my guy. I wouldn't rather nobody else come to Georgia but him because he's a great fit. He's a great kid. You get what I'm saying? He comes in, he holds himself accountable. He holds other people accountable, I know he's going to be ready day one whenever he steps on the field. And he's a baller. Like, of course I had to see him. You know what I'm saying? He's one of the best players to come out of Philly, defensive-wise and offensive-wise.
Here. First of all, I think you just sort of like the idea that a player like Webb would be that enthusiastic about someone from Philly, someone who, as Webb has himself have seen, he calls him a baller, says he's a very good player also. There's kind of a funny moment in that clip as well that I edited out just for the sake of time. At one point in time, instead of saying, oh, yeah, he's my guy, he said, oh, yeah, he's my young buck. But good stuff from Webb all the way around. Incredibly enthusiastic about the Philly-born Tykee Smith being a part of the same Georgia secondary that Mark Webb once called home. And it becomes another one of these examples of that Philly to Athens pipeline that's included DeAndre Swift, included Mark Webb, and now Tykee Smith. But maybe that pipeline can have different word to use instead of that. But either way, that pathway to Georgia through the city of Philadelphia, maybe that now continues even beyond this, because I thought this was really cool on social media this week. Tykee Smith, who is only just now getting a chance to even be at Georgia. He's finished his coursework up at West Virginia, now transferring in. But you always love to see how quickly these guys become on his social media feed. Could probably play both. He's a little bit of a weak side hybrid, outside linebacker type guy, whatever else, but he's one of the top players in the country for the class of 2022, also hailing from that city of Philadelphia. And I loved, much the same way that Mark Webb said, oh yeah, I've got a guy from my hometown who I know is a baller, who I know can play. I'm glad he has kind of followed my footsteps from Philly to Athens here at UGA. You've got Tykee Smith now saying the same thing about Anai White before he even gets to the University of Georgia. Let me read this to you on Twitter. Mark Webb talking about Anai White. So Anai White goes on Twitter and says, hey, where's my UGA love? And listen, if I was one of these recruits, I'd be kind of cultivating some of the social media following probably as well. He says, don't forget, I'm not committed, so where's my love from these UGA fans? And Tykee Smith jumps in on this and says, hey, you know what we talked about, little bro. And he says, Philly to Athens, you got the airplane kind of taking you there. So I like all of this. I mean, obviously, I'd like to have Anai White as a part of the class of 2022. That goes without saying. But even beyond that, I like the idea that Tykee Smith already feels as comfortable and at home well enough here at the University of Georgia that he's already pushing for a guy like White to join him. And yes, I know this is one of those moments where I do probably come across, a little bit hypocritical, because obviously on a lot of shows I talk about, my desire to see Georgia continue to dominate the in-state recruiting. That's something I love to see. That's something I'm very proud of, the way that Georgia has had great success with in-state recruiting. But when you can go out there and have a little pipeline to Philadelphia and have guys like Swift and Webb and now Tykee Smith, proud of the fact that they left the big city, came down here to the South, and looking at other guys to do the same thing. And by the way, it seems like we've had a few of these fairly big names, top recruits kind of coming from that Philadelphia area, that Southeast Pennsylvania area. Not always an area that we think of as elite recruiting hotbed, but boy, it seems like there have been a few big-time recruits there as of late. So just kind of a fun way to start the Friday show. A guy who's just now even getting a chance to be at UGA, also looking to see folks following his footsteps. Anai White, one of the names to watch for the 2022 class. Good reminder all the way around that as we head towards the month of June, the world of recruiting is going to really, really heat up. And I can't wait to talk to our own recruiting insider, Jeff Sintel, about all of that in just a little bit. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. We're presented today by Kroger, and we're glad to have you with us no matter how you get to us today, live on video, 10 a.m., Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Radio Noon, of course, in Athens on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, and as a podcast, wherever you find them, including the world-famous DawgNation.com. Just really glad to have you as a part of our program here today. And a big thanks to our friends at Kroger for making it all possible. Kroger getting you ready for some summer fun. I know this. In my family, we are just kind of over the moon. At least the kids in my household are. But the idea that we're getting very close to them being out of school, some of their spring sports starting to wrap up. You start having an eye towards vacation, all the stuff that kind of goes along with that. Well, Kroger's also got its eye on summer there as well, getting you covered for everything you need on all those summer essentials. The grills, the patio furniture, the pool supplies. My family, we had dinner last night sitting out there on the back deck. And it's just that time of year to enjoy that kind of stuff. Kroger getting you ready to do all that, pool supplies as well. All the ingredients to make all that outdoor cooking and all the stuff that you're doing, make it great. Kroger.com for more on that, or just stop by the store that's closest to you, Kroger.com, to find out more details on your way there. Also, good to have Kroger as a part of DawgNation Daily here today. It's Jeff Sintel coming up in just a couple of minutes. Before that, though, let's go around the doghouse here today. And I want to go back in time here for a moment to after G-Day, after spring practice, and the thoughts that JT Daniels kind of had about where the Georgia team was at that point in the football calendar looking ahead to the upcoming year, and the obvious energy that exists to take care of some unfinished business here for the 2021 season. And I tell you to do this every now and then. I'm going to tell you to do this again right now. I want you to notice the couple of words that Daniels uses over and over again in this particular clip. He's obviously talking about winning a national championship, which is interesting enough in its own right, but listen to the repetitive words that Daniels uses. These words matter to me, and I'll tell you why. First, here's JT Daniels.
There's no denying that you want to win a natty. I think we have the team to do it. Absolutely, it's a great team. I think we've done, and Coach Smart's done a really good job of instilling a team standard and team DNA that a lot of the guys have really taken accustomed to. There's a lot of good things going for the team. There's just things we got to focus on, things we got to develop, because we have the team, to do whatever we want.
So let me tell you the two words that I hear over and over again when I hear that clip from JT Daniels. First of all, as a Georgia fan, I love the idea that Daniels is talking about winning a national championship, but beyond that, it is the way in which he discusses it that I find to be really interesting. He says, we, and then it's team. You know, Daniels, I mean, listen, it's possible to fake this, and I'm certainly not saying that JT Daniels is. I'm just saying that you could potentially fake that. But Daniels comes across to me as really authentic, as being someone who does care about team goals and does care about his place in the team as a part of, as he says, they're kind of a we environment. And he is good enough at talking about that you're kind of left to believe, well, he must authentically, genuinely believe this, because he seems to say those kinds of things a lot. Daniels really does, in a way that maybe not every, kind of college version of a franchise quarterback, maybe not every quarterback would be able to buy into. Daniels really sees himself, based on all the ways in which he speaks all the time, sees himself as a part of a team, a kind of a, what do you call it, like a cog in the system, more so than the Georgia football being some sort of star vehicle to propel him to even, greater fame. Daniels is just really good at talking that way. That's always been really impressive to me. That clip, another example of that. However, I was thinking this week, though, that even though Daniels seems to be very content to be a team player on a good team, boy, as a quarterback, you obviously have just a chance at fame that other positions doesn't provide. That the face of college football in most years is going to be a quarterback, because quarterback is the single most important position probably in any team sport. I don't think really anything else probably comes close. And so with that in mind, we do have kind of an interesting landscape around us when it comes to college football here in 2021. And I'll tell you what caused me to think about this. There was a story the other day, Ben Kercheval writing at CBSSports.com. Now, the story itself was about Spencer Rattler, who's a very good quarterback at Oklahoma, and obviously one of those guys, if you're thinking about Daniels as a potential very high first-round draft pick or a Heisman Trophy candidate or anything like that, some of Daniels' top competition probably comes from Norman, Oklahoma, in the presence of Spencer Rattler. And so this was an article about Rattler, but there was something written in the article that I thought also kind of applied potentially to JT Daniels or any of these other top quarterbacks we kind of think of around the sport right now. So let me read you this from Ben Kercheval, CBS Sports. We'll talk about how this kind of relates to JT Daniels. He says, and remember, the original context is about Spencer Rattler, but it applies all across the board. Kercheval writes, meanwhile, college football is looking for a new face. Kercheval says Trevor Lawrence, who in many ways was the sports ambassador, is gone, as are Justin Fields, Zach Wilson, Mac Jones, and others from a stacked quarterback class. So Kercheval says because all those other quarterbacks are now gone from the sport, all of a sudden there's a new opportunity for a new quarterback to step in and be this sport's, the word he uses is ambassador, or the other word that he uses is the face of the sport. Now think about this for a moment. I think you would say that you know this to be true. That last year, remember when we had the concerns and the doubt about whether or not the college football season would even be able to take place, and at one point in time, it looked like there was a huge push kind of coming from the Big Ten part of the world to not participate in the sport, not play this year, and for a while there, it just seemed like this was a runaway train of, oh my gosh, the season's going to be canceled right before our very eyes. And you did have a guy like Trevor Lawrence who stepped up and used his social media presence to kind of argue against that, the hashtag we want to play. And I don't think anybody would deny that Lawrence last year kind of came into the season, because we'd seen him as the Clemson quarterback in 2018 and 2019. And he kind of arrived into the 2020 season with the kind of the prestige that comes from being a national championship winning quarterback and a guy we'd gotten to know over a couple of years, that he kind of was that face of college football. I would say that Justin Fields was also, to a degree, maybe a level below Lawrence, because Lawrence had done it for 2 years. Fields had only done it for one, kind of a level below that, but also someone who had a similar level of gravitas within the Big Ten. Mac Jones, Zach Wilson, guys like that kind of only emerged as household names during the past season. But Fields and Lawrence had a level of fame far above that. Had there been an EA Sports college football video game for this past year, you kind of imagine that either, I guess, in sort of the name, image, likeness era, the Lawrence face, the Fields face would have been the faces that kind of popped up on a game like that. But now they're gone. And when you look around college football, you don't see an obvious heir apparent, right? The way that Tua Tagovailoa may have been prior to Trevor Lawrence, or the way that Deshaun Watson maybe at one point would have been around college football. You don't see that obvious heir apparent to be, as Ben Kirchhoff says, the face of the sport, the ambassador of the sport, the most well-known guy in the sport. And in Daniel's case, I'm not even sure how much he really aspires to be that, as we just played you audio a moment ago. In talking about winning a national championship, this isn't, I'm going to do that, I'm going to be the Heisman Trophy winner, I'm going to show the world how good I am. That's not the way that he's talking. He's saying we, team, team, team. So he seems fairly comfortable kind of being a part of the ensemble cast here at UGA, but that doesn't mean he'd turn down the fame if he has a chance to get it. And obviously for Georgia, who has kind of become kind of a pipeline for quarterbacks as of late, with Brock Vandagriff arriving, and obviously big expectations eventually for Carson Beck getting a bigger chance to shine, and Gunnar Stockton for the class of 2022, and there's talk about Arch Manning visiting for the class of 2023, and maybe Georgia's in the mix for that recruitment a bit. Clearly, having a quarterback who's the ambassador or the face of the sport would not be a bad thing for UGA, and it is a possibility. Now, maybe it's Rattler, maybe it ends up being Bryce Young, the heir apparent to Mac Jones, Alabama, who steps up and takes that fame. But one way or another, that spot is open. The most well-known quarterback, the quarterback that even casual fans of the world of sports are aware exists in college football, that's going to be somebody here in 2021. And right now, it is not decided who it will be. And I would say that JT Daniels does obviously have a chance to become that guy. That is Around the Doghouse. Before we get Jeff Sintel, let me also remind you, and I got some questions about this related yesterday, there are still tickets available for this, but obviously the time is now to act on taking advantage of it. We're going to have a great time next Friday. It's May 21st. There at the Battery Atlanta and Truist Park for our DawgNation Days of Summer event. Coming there, obviously that night we'll all be going to the Braves game together as the Atlanta Braves get ready to take on the Pittsburgh Pirates. That's going to be fun. We'll all be sitting in the same section there that night in the lower level Diamond Corner portion of Truist Park. But before that, the real fun's going to be going on starting at 4 p.m. there at the Terrapin Tap Room. We're going to settle in. We're going to enjoy some dinner from Fox Brothers Barbecue. We're going to enjoy some of the Terrapin beer there, whatever beverage you want to enjoy. That's going to be there going on there that night. We've got a lot of DawgNation swag we're going to be giving away, including, I'm not supposed to say this, but I will anyway, kind of a really cool T-shirt. That's going to be kind of a fun, cool part of all of this. Also, a chance to win Braves signed baseballs, future Braves tickets, all that kind of stuff. Chance to win gift cards from the Terrapin Tap Room. We're going to do a Q&A. We're going to talk some Georgia football. We're going to hang out. This is like some of the DawgNation Days of Summer events we've done in the past. We're doing it at the Battery Atlanta and Truist Park, and we're all going to the Braves game together. Tickets for all of this, just $77. That's fees included, by the way. So website to go to get yours, braves.com/DawgNation. That's braves.com/DawgNation. Be a part of the big event, DawgNation Days of Summer, coming to the Battery Atlanta, Truist Park, the Terrapin Tap Room, before the Braves take on the Pirates next Friday. Get your tickets today, braves.com/DawgNation. Cannot wait to see all of you there for that. It's going to be a great time. All right, there was some big news this week that we talked about earlier in the week about a Georgia staffer on his way to Texas A&M, and could that have some reverberations for the rest of the 2022 class? Let's find that out right now as we get ready to say hello to Jeff Sintel, going on the road, assisted by AAA with him, here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. Happy Friday, everybody.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
We will say hello to Jeff Sintel as we go on the road, assisted by AAA here today. And, of course, it's great to have AAA back with us on the program here today. And great to have Jeff Sintel back with us here again there as well. And Jeff, I'll say good morning to you and jump right into the conversation here because you wrote about this at DawgNation.com. Nick Williams, a guy that Georgia fans obviously know very well, a former player and a guy that's been a part of the kind of support staff for the last few years, most recently working under Trey Scott as an analyst helping out the defensive line. He has now taken a similar job at Texas A&M, and as you've written before, Williams has been instrumental in the recruitment of a lot of Georgia players and a prominent point of contact for some key members of the 2022 class as well. How big of a deal is this in your mind that Williams now recruits the Aggies instead of the Bulldogs?
Yeah, Brandon, good morning, everybody. I guess the first thing to think about here is that, I don't know, if you look at Nick Williams and you sum up what he's done as a recruiter for Georgia over the last 3 or 4 years, I think he's probably been one of the most, he's been as influential as even staff members have in on-field coaches, assistants in a lot of recruitments. The thing with Nick is, everybody knows he's from Bainbridge. Connections there to Dayon Bowie, the 5-star athlete in the 2022 class. He played about 32 games at Georgia. He never really was a starter, mostly a contributor on special teams, and he's been back in the program for a while as a GA and then an analyst. But you saw a lot of things in his life over the last 6 months. He welcomed a new young son into his family, I believe, this week. He got engaged earlier this year. It seems like Nick's just made the decisions that he has to move on with his life, start making the choices that will get him on the field as a coach, because I think that's eventually where he'll wind up as a very effective on-field position coach and recruiter for a big boy program. And I think the fast track, the quickest way that he gets on the field was probably at a Texas A&M and not at Georgia. And that's just the way to look at that there. I know a lot of people were asking and reaching out, is it simply a matter of money? Why can't Georgia pay him as much to be a defensive analyst as Texas A&M was or will be paying? I just don't think it's something as simple as that.
Yeah, we said this in the show that it's probably pretty good professional advice if you're looking to be a coach at the major college level to do something similar to what Williams is doing by moving from Georgia to a place like Texas A&M. You're simply introducing yourself to another collection of networking contacts, right? It's the Kirby Smart coaching tree on this side. It's the Jimbo Fisher coaching tree there on the other side, and that's just more networking opportunities that you can eventually take advantage of, and eventually that will probably lead to Williams being an on-field coach for some team in the SEC, whether it's Georgia, A&M, or whoever else. But it's also hard not to notice a recruitment that I already expected to be very contested. Georgia holding the pledge right now from the 5-star defensive lineman Bear Alexander. And while I take Alexander seriously when he's told you that he's fully committed to UGA, I take that very seriously. I also have been around the block a couple times, and I'm led to believe this is still a very contested recruitment. And all of a sudden, one of the guys that has been instrumental in Alexander's recruitment is now working for the other side, the bad guys, from my perspective. So specifically for a guy like Bear Alexander, the in-state pull already coming from the Aggies, Georgia fighting hard to hold on to this commitment. How much does the switch of Williams impact that in particular?
Yeah, I look at Williams, and another thing to say about the big picture there with Williams is I think this was a chance for him to prove that he was more than a Georgia guy, recruiting for Georgia from a position of strength with all the great facilities and everything Georgia has to offer. Now, Texas A&M is going to have all those same things, but it's going to be different coaches, different, like you said, I guess a little bit different network. Cataloging a lot of the kind of moving pieces for Georgia in terms of Nick Williams and how it affects it. I'm going to say this with all the expected amount of consternation or hesitation most will say. Anything can happen with recruiting and, these young men because everything has happened and everything will eventually happen. But I guess I don't have, and I've kind of felt this way for a long time, I guess I don't have the same reservations and worries that most of the Georgia fan base and the people that I write for in our audience, I'm not as worried about Big Bear Alexander as others are. And I guess people are looking for a reason to worry even more about him with Nick Williams in Texas. I think that Dayon Bowie is a link that's very strong there. Mikael Williams is a link that's very strong there with Nick Williams. I also can't help but notice like some of the very best relationships that Nick Williams formed while he was at Georgia was also with some defensive back types like Lewis Seen, Keely Ringo, for example. I think what Nick Williams is going to do is it's really going to help Jimbo Fisher stop, deny, prevent, stall, whatever kind of burgeoning juggernaut that Steve Sarkisian is trying to build in Texas. I think he's going to be that effective as a recruiter. And I think the main thing, which was one of the main reasons why we tried to draw attention to that story, because everybody wondered, hey, Nick Williams, what is he, a GA? Is he just an analyst? It's not only the relationships and key figures and key recruits that he's helped reel into Athens, but it's also a guy that you see another. I guess I would call it a trend. But there are three major members of the Georgia recruiting machine from as early as the 2019 season that are now in Texas A&M and College Station. That's Marshall Malco, the former personnel director, who's now an associate AD in terms of personnel at Texas A&M. There's James Coley, of course. Everybody knows that story, chapter and verse. And now there's Nick Williams. I think it's just Texas A&M trying to make right on that chicken dinner circuit booster club meeting pledge that Jimbo Fisher said when he's going to go try and take down Alabama.
Yeah, I mean, here's my thing about Bear Alexander, though, and by no means am I arguing for him not coming to Georgia. That's not what I'm doing. But the reason why I treat the Alexander thing a little bit different than some recruitments is when you're talking about a Keely Ringo leaving Arizona, there is no home court advantage in that recruitment because Arizona State don't play at that level. Same thing for Darnell Washington leaving the state of Nevada. And a lot of these other national recruiting wins that Georgia has gotten, they've gotten a lot of them, they are players that come from states where pretty much everybody kind of fights from the same level ground. Whereas in the case of Bear Alexander, I mean, listen, there aren't a lot of five-star defensive linemen anywhere, and I would say that Texas probably, as many great recruits they have, that's also kind of a rarity for that state a little bit sometimes too. So there's a huge sign on his back because of the fact that you do have these, in-state programs trying to build themselves up, and the fact that, geographically you do have programs that ought to have something of a home court advantage in recruitments like this. So one of the reasons why I'm always going to kind of keep an eye on the Alexander recruitment, even though I'm very glad that Georgia holds the public pledge here, is because he does hail from a state where the in-state schools ought to have a little bit of an edge just simply because they are recruiting from a position of geographic strength.
Yeah. So Brandon, I think the thing there is you'd agree with me that maybe it's not quite the same thing as a player in Louisiana, though, in terms of Texas, or maybe even a player or player from Alabama. I just look at Bears, and this will be a contested recruitment because he's so highly regarded. But for me, I think I look at the main thing, and I think the main thing is like over the last. I think I'm going to pull this out of my memory banks, but I think over the last 5 years, I think the state of Texas schools have produced one first-round pick.
Yeah.
And that's just atrocious, Brandon, any way you want to look at it. I mean, you go back and I think it's two counting Myles Garrett, but I mean, the state of Texas schools, going back to 2016, I think the number is 2 or 3 first round draft picks, and that's Texas and Texas A&M. There's not a lot of development. There's not a lot of big wins going on. There's not a lot of, those high profile draft day photo ops or whatever. And Bears recruitment, while I think Georgia will still have to recruit Alexander like he is an uncommitted recruit. Well, that's nothing new. Georgia has had to do that with a lot of 5 stars that they have. I think Bears recruitment on the degree of difficulty scale is not going to be as hard as other ones that are still very much contested, like a Mikael Williams, like a Travis Shaw, like a Walter Nolan, like a Kojo Antwi. Mm-hmm. I think those uncommitted guys, I think the climb, and I think just the type of you better hike your britches up and put your weight belt on and roll your sleeves up. I think those recruitments, I think, are going to be a lot harder to manage than the one from Big Bear Alexander.
This is, kind of in the weeds. I want to move on and talk about something different, but you mentioned Antwi, who's obviously kind of got a pull to Texas A&M there as well. Any chance that Williams kind of tries to develop a relationship with him a little bit, knowing that Kojo's obviously getting a pull from Georgia there too. The switch just happens. Is there a chance that Nick Williams becomes a factor in the Kojo Antwi recruitment at all?
I guess I'd say we're in the weeds, but I mean, I think the way that most people should look at this is, heck, does losing Nick Williams hurt Georgia's overall RPMs on their recruiting machine? Yes, I think so. Does it make add some more horsepower to Texas A&M? Yes, I think so. But I think the young men do realize that he is just part of the lure and part of the show and part of the attraction to a certain school, that great relationship. By and large, most of these young men realize that coaches, especially a GA analyst type level, those guys are fast tracking their way up the career ladder. So they're not basing their decisions a lot on hey, this guy's there and he's a really good relationship and he's like the silver bullet in a lot of the final recruiting matrix equations for signing a kid. The other thing is, I think Kojo Antwi and Texas A&M, I think those relationships, if Kojo Antwi does end up at Texas A&M, I don't think Nick Williams is going to have a lot to do with that. I just think what he's already got in place over the last 4 to 6 months is going to be, I guess, the deal breaker or the deal maker in terms of that.
We saw some Georgia recruiting targets honored with some high school awards this week. One of them's already a Georgia signee and on campus. Brock Vandegrift, the Georgia Gatorade Player of the Year. Jalen Walker, who, as you've made us aware, just finished up his high school season in North Carolina, also honored with the same award there in the Tar Heel State. Kind of nice to see some of these Georgia recruiting targets, or in one case signee, getting a chance to be honored for their high school season. That's always a good thing, isn't it, Jeff?
Always a good thing, Brandon, and a little bit of what we kind of dripped on the forum this morning, I believe, early morning, is that I don't know if Brock Vandegrift's done yet. I think he is going to be a strong contender for the National Gatorade Player of the Year award, considering he's the 5-star Golden Boy quarterback who won a state title in his senior year and has that 4.0 GPA. Even though if you see some of those prom photos that are showing up for a lot of the Georgia guys right now, he's looking a little like Hank Jr., a little bit like Merle Haggard, maybe a little bit like Chris Stapleton for all the young voices out there. But I think Brock's got an ideal resume to maybe win the national honor, and I think part of it's helped by a contemporary like Caleb Williams not even having a high school senior season, and that's another high-profile quarterback. So Caleb wasn't even eligible for any of these awards because he didn't have a season at Gonzaga in D.C. He's already at Oklahoma, looked pretty good in the spring game, but I don't think that's it for maybe Brock Vandegrift has a little bit more. Brock Vandegrift has a little bit more meat on the bone, and one of the stories. I still got so many stories to tell about Brock. Sometime during the dog days of summer, Brandon. But one thing I thought, I don't know if you saw it or not yet, but how odd is it that Greg Vandegrift, his father, sold Cokes and popcorn at Neyland Stadium, and his first game was the 1980 Herschel Walker Tennessee-Georgia game. Now, Brendan, I'll tell you, the many times I've gotten a chance to drift on over to Prince Avenue Christian over the last year and a half, 2 years, Greg actually has a copy of that. He shared it. He showed it to me, man. And I tell you, put that thing in your hands, man. I don't want to say that feels like something metaphysical or anything else like that, but that was kind of neat. You sit there, and when I had the program in my hands, I thought, okay, this is the big stiff
really
back third team program, because you flip to the flip card in the middle with the rosters, and there it is, Herschel Walker, Johnson County, Wrightsville, Georgia, listed as the third team back there for Georgia on that game day program. And, man, that was a pretty cool thing to get to see.
That is a very, honestly, if Coach Vandegrift is listening right now, hit us up. We might want to talk about getting that piece of memorabilia from you right there. That sounds like a pretty good collection piece to add to those of us who enjoy the UGA memorabilia and things like that. And also, if we weren't in the weeds before, Jeff, we definitely are now, because the laundry list of quarterbacks who have family that grew up cheering for Tennessee that ended up playing somewhere else, that's about as long as my arm right now. Tennessee fans can tell you all of them, whether it's former quarterbacks or current quarterbacks in college or recruits in the 2022 class. It seems like there's kind of an epidemic of families who grew up cheering for Tennessee who have sons who are big time quarterbacks, and those quarterbacks end up going somewhere else.
Yeah, that's a very long list. You want to talk about that's that rough on both sides of the water, I guess, on your favorite golf hole or whatever, man. Yeah. You're going to find a lot of balls in the weeds there. Starting with Trevor Lawrence, you got the Arch Manning recruitment. He's going to start visiting everywhere in the class of 2023. And I tell you what, Brandon, here's another side road. I was thinking about this the other day. I tell you what, any 2023 quarterback that wants to come on and sign on and play ball at the University of Georgia, I mean, that guy pretty much has a Georgia nightlight in his room, and he has a Georgia light switch plate as he shuts his light off every night. And he basically goes out to take the trash out in a pair of Georgia Crocs, because if you're a 2023 quarterback and you want to play for the University of Georgia and sign in that cycle with that quarterback room, I mean, you really just want to be a Bulldog.
So obviously there was some reporting this week that Manning may visit, and I promise we'll move off and talk about something else in a minute. But so there was some reporting that Manning's going to take an unofficial visit. I think it's a multi-day unofficial visit, if I remember reading correctly. Do you take Georgia seriously in this recruitment? Because I think right now it seems like the Arch Manning stuff is kind of just really getting started. I mean, there are some ties between Smart and the Manning family, you know, whether you start calling about, Eli, Peyton, all the whole deal here. There is some ties with Smart and the Manning family. Obviously, it's going to be a who's who of big-time programs here in the South that I think Arch is mostly considering. I mean, how seriously do you take Georgia in that Arch Manning recruitment?
I don't know if I'm going to take Georgia seriously in that recruitment at all right now, but I think what it is he's going to go see a lot of places, Brandon, and he hasn't been anywhere. Like, there's so many of these 2023 kids that have never looked at a college coach eye to eye and never even been on a campus before. I think what the Georgia visit will serve is he will see what Georgia's all about. He will see the first class treatment that he'll get, and I think he'll use that as a barometer to know what he should really be looking for, and what stand out, and what is unique, and what is significant. I tell you, the low key team to watch right there, Brandon, because everybody says he plays so much like his grandfather Archie and not his famous Super Bowl uncles, is I think Ole Miss is a team to watch right there with Arch Manning. I know everybody's going to think LSU is going to get him because of the ties to that state, but I would watch a school like that, a low-key school, kind of like an Ole Miss, because, I mean, Arch is a guy that this young man right here is, I think he's the number one quarterback for the 2023 cycle, but he's a guy that's going to run around a lot more. It's kind of going to look a lot more like a cross between a Johnny Manziel and a Eli Manning than maybe strictly the Manning bloodline of quarterbacks over the last 20, 25 years.
Well, fun to think about that. We'll look forward to following that recruitment wherever he lands in the days to come. It's On the Road, assisted by AAA with Jeff Sintel here today. As I said before, it is great to have AAA as a part of what we're doing with Jeff Sintel here on DawgNation Daily each and every Friday. You already think about AAA when it comes to the legendary roadside assistance, and I want you to also think about them when it comes to auto insurance there as well. You can switch to AAA and save big when it comes to auto insurance. Website to go to find out more about this, AAA.com/auto insurance. That's AAA.com/auto insurance. Switch and save today. And, of course, as I said before, great to have AAA back on the road with Jeff Sintel each and every Friday. Good piece from you at DawgNation.com last few days when it comes to Malachi Starks. Very impressive Georgia commit. I think one of the most impressive Georgia commits thus far for the class of 2022, both on and off the field. But some of the on-field measurements for Starks lately have been really pretty spectacular. Jeff, this is a guy who's really earning, justifiably so, a lot of attention ahead of his senior season here. Kind of impressive stuff from some of the recent workouts from Starks, are there not?
Very impressive, man. There was a reason why he was number one on the top targets list until he chose Georgia on March 25th. I mean, Brandon, we all knew he was good. We all knew he was a five-star player, but he has quickly shifted gears, and I think I like that metaphor or that term phrasing there, shifted gears. I mean, Brandon, he's approaching, I'm going to say this, and everybody don't spit your coffee out or don't go put on your Georgia ball cap and run around the house as I say this, but he's approaching Champ Bailey type athlete territory right now as a five-star recruit in the class of 2022. I think, Brennan, he's knocking on the door at 210 pounds. But what he did this spring, really just over the last few weeks, still rehabbing from that hand injury. Brendan, he flies 24 feet 9 inches in the long jump. That's the third best long jump in the country this spring, and it's the best one by a non-senior kind of a guy that's going to go be a long jumper for a SEC school or a powerful college team like an Oregon. That's a non-track guy who had number one long jump in the country among underclassmen, and he's third in the nation. And let me put this in the right perspective to make people think, where I'm coming from with the Champ Bailey stuff. is Champ Bailey held the Georgia record in the long jump at 25 feet 11 inches. And that sucker stood for like 25 years until Matthew Bowling came along just this spring and started jumping 26 feet. So you've got Malachi, Brandon Wright knocking on the door at 210 pounds. Not only doing that, but Brandon, he soared a full foot over what was previously his personal record. But then you match that with a 10.55 in the 100. Let me put this into explanation. I don't think McCole Hardman ran faster than 10.7 when he was in high school as a senior. And you've got Malachi Starks at 6'2.5", maybe 210 pounds, running a 10.55 as a junior, coming off injury, and also long jumping the way he is. I don't know if Georgia fans can get or should be any more excited, than they need to be about Malachi Starks.
Let me squeeze in one final question before I let you go. I started the show today by talking about kind of a cool tweet from Tykee Smith encouraging Anai White, very impressive. Call him outside linebacker, defensive end, whatever you want to call him, big-time prospect for the class of 2022, also hailing from Philadelphia, a city that's been pretty good to Georgia as of late. Jeff, I love the idea that Tykee Smith is not really even, only just now available to even show up at UGA. He's only just recently finished his coursework at West Virginia, but he's already recruiting in his hometown for the Dogs. I got to tell you, Jeff, a lot of Georgia fans really like that.
So I think there's something there, Brandon. I think eventually it's going to come down to maybe Georgia or Alabama for Anai White. Really great young man. And it's working because Tykee Smith is around his high school program a lot, especially since he's virtual or no longer, in school every day at West Virginia. But he's around that MTEP charter program in Philadelphia a lot, and still has close ties to basically the entire team, is like a big brother aspect. And then you sprinkle in the reputation of the University of Georgia and the city of Philadelphia right now anyway, with Mark Webb, Akil Crumpton, and DeAndre Swift, of course. A lot of things are intersecting, but here's the thing about Smith that's interesting. Smith won't play with Anai White this year because Anai White's still a high school senior.
Right.
And if he does what he needs to and plays up to his ability, I don't know if you saw this, Brandon, but Pro Football Focus had Smith as the number one returning safety in college football for the 2021 season. That was even ahead of the fabulous Kyle Hamilton at Notre Dame. Georgia boy done good up there in South Bend, but he's recruiting from a position that works, and he might not even ever play with his contemporary or his younger brother type there, coming out of the same MTEP charter program. And yet it seems like there's really something there with the University of Georgia. I think he's going to take his official visit, I want to say the second or third week in June. Man, there's so many of these to keep track of. I mean, literally, Brendan, if we wanted to have an ideal sponsorship, we could put a board up on DawgNation.com and have the official and unofficial visits that are happening in the month of June. And it would kind of look like triplicate of one of the boards at Hartsfield in one of the days. Because, I mean, they're going to be dudes coming in and out all month long in the month of June.
So, simple question, very short answer is fine here. You mentioned a lot of official visits coming in June, maybe even Anai White there as well. Obviously, these recruits are incredibly excited about visiting again, and you imagine they would be. But if Georgia had its druthers, as my family would have said when I was growing up, they would prefer these official visits not come in June, right? They'd rather a guy like White visit more in that winter portion of the year, kind of closing the deal with a big visit, right? This is not Georgia's preference to have an official visit taking place in June. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, I think what they're doing is and really, Brandon, it's just a chance to get to know each other again, because everybody else would try to take the ability to do so. So everybody's just jumping in the deep end, so to speak, with what they're trying to do here. It's so funny, Brandon, after all these years of covering recruits where official visits don't matter and people want to space them out and people want to do them in the fall for big ball games. No, that's all chunked to the side now, because, the amount of kids that are having 4 in a month, 5 in a month, midweek official visits, throwing in 4 officials and 1 unofficial in the month of June, it's really staggering, the amount of kids that are trying to do this. And really what you see here is a great thinking man's recruiting school like a Georgia. If they know a kid's going to take that decision all the way out to February, then they're going to basically say, they're going to duck, dodge, and parry that official until the fall. or until November, until December, because they want that good last taste before the race really starts going with a lot of these guys. But other kids that are ready to get it over with and get it done, that's why so many people are coming in June, because you got to strike while the iron's hot with a lot of these guys.
Very well said, Jeff. I know you got some good stuff coming up at DawgNation.com over the weekend, the next few days. I'll look forward to reading that. Of course, thank you so much for being with us here on the road, assisted by AAA here today. We will enjoy the chance to chat with you again soon.
Hey, Brendan, everybody have a good weekend. Take it easy, buddy.
You too.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
I want to react to some of what Jeff had to say. First, let me tell you about my friends at the Finnish Long Drink. You've heard me talk about it before. The Long Drink comes from Finland. It was initially started, I'm going to sound like I know more about history than I do, but it was initially started like the 1950s or so, back when the summer games were in Helsinki, and it's been very popular over there for a while. It's a beverage that comes ready to drink right out of the can. So you're talking about, you get that great, if you're drinking the original, it comes in the blue can. You get the citrus flavor, the kind of the gin kick that goes with that. You get it it's already mixed, it's already ready to drink. Just, open the can, drink it. It already tastes good. Coming from Finland, been in the United States now for a couple of years, and now it's available in Georgia. And I've told you before, there's nothing more than I love than introducing this product to someone who's never tried it before, because they have enough varieties that there's really something for everybody, whether you want the original that's kind of in that sort of, traditional vein, obviously an organic product there as well, or you want the Long Drink Zero, which is no sugar, no carbs. That's really cool. The Finnish Long Drink Strong, which is 8.5% alcohol by volume. It comes in the black can. That's got a great liquor kick to go along with the tremendous flavor there. And you got the cranberry. I know that's really big in UGA right now. A lot of the bars on the Athens scene, they love that long drink cranberry. So the Finnish Long Drink, a lot of different varieties, won a ton of awards. This is really good stuff. I talked a few minutes ago on the show about just the excitement that we have about kind of getting it going with the summer. I can promise you this, the Finnish Long Drink pairs well with whatever you're doing here this summer. So your question may be, well, where can I find it? Let me give you a website to go to. You get a lot more information there. It's thelongdrink.com. That's the website. Very simple. Thelongdrink.com. Go there. Find out where it's available near you. Enjoy some. The Finnish Long Drink here this summer going to be a lot of fun. All right, a couple of things from Jeff Sintel. And yes, he does cite the Pro Football Focus numbers related to Tykee Smith. We've had some fun with this in the show as of late about how much we really take these numbers seriously, because on the one hand, hey, Tykee Smith touting him for a big year. We like that. There was a thing the other day about touting Jamari Salyer for a big year. We kind of like that too. But on the other hand, one of their guys had Florida quarterback Emory Jones as the top 10 pick. All of a sudden, you start to wonder, wait, is the same logic that led them to believe that Jones is that good of a quarterback the same logic they're using to tout Smith and Salyer? Obviously, we like a couple of those opinions better than some others when it comes to that. And really interesting stuff there from Jeff at the end on the way this parade of visits is about to go down. It's going to be just an onslaught of recruiting news. Maybe not always commitments necessarily, because some of these guys are still going to be deliberate with their process. But boy, a lot of recruiting news, a lot of movement. The same way the absence of visits probably impacted last year's signings, who ultimately went where. I think the presence of these visits this year is also going to alter that. Georgia, who's always been very good at that face-to-face contact, that ability to forge a relationship in those in-person get-togethers. Boy, Georgia getting a chance to do that again. You got to think from a Georgia perspective, that's going to be a very good thing. A couple of SEC through stories I want to get to right now. It is fairly obvious what the dominant theme of this offseason is now going to be. If you got a chance to listen to the full show yesterday, you heard me talking about the fact that what we heard last year, the dominant theme around the SEC was Florida, Florida, Florida. How good the Gators going to be. This is their year, blah, blah, blah. Now, on the one hand, that prediction kind of turned out true, and that Florida did win the SEC East. On the other hand, though, this is still a Gators team that lost 4 games. So you can decide for yourself if all the preseason hype that Florida got a year ago was justified or not. I guess, your mileage may vary on that. However, this year, it's fairly obvious that the new version of whatever it was with Florida a year ago is Jimbo Fisher and A&M trying to take down Alabama. All of this starts relatively innocently, I would say, because I don't put a lot of stock in what coaches say in booster club meetings, especially back when I was a kid in the 80s and 90s. This stuff happened behind closed doors. There was very little media coverage of it. You could say whatever you wanted to, and you, for the most part, kind of get away with it. Well, now there's no such thing as a local story anymore. Anything that anybody says has the potential of going viral very, very quickly, including Fisher a couple of weeks ago saying that he wanted to beat Nick Saban's fill in the blank there, his behind, while Alabama was still coached by Nick Saban, not waiting until he's done. Since then, Fisher has continued these tours throughout the state of Texas, local radio interviews, things like that, and he has not really backed down from that claim. Obviously, he's now in a position where he kind of can't, but doing another interview even recently where he's kind of sort of doubled down on this again. Now, it's not volatile language necessarily, but he's not apologizing, and why should he? He's not apologizing for his belief that, yeah, we think we can take down Alabama. We think this year may be the year we do it. Obviously, he's been recruiting for that very thing here on, over the course of the last couple of years. And so you head towards SEC media days and all that kind of stuff. The talk of Jimbo and the Aggies is that kind of top 10 team below Alabama, trying to do what Auburn did in 2017, what LSU did in 2019, which is topple the Crimson Tide. That is clearly going to be a big topic of conversation. Let me tell you one more thing about this. This is exactly the way that Kirby Smart likes it. Smart does not cultivate this kind of attention. He doesn't give you the big talk. If he's asked about Nick Saban, Alabama, he'll pivot away from that very quickly. If he's asked about Dan Mullen in Florida, which he has been in the past, he also pivots away from that really quickly. This is a strategy that Fisher seems to want to try to employ to his advantage. Kirby Smart, though, would choose to go about his business in a very different manner. He does not want to talk in such a way that gives any of us quotes to run with, quotes to use. Those of us who like hot takes and all that kind of stuff, Smart does not feed that beast. Jimbo Fisher has chosen to, and the attention about who is the big threat to Alabama in this offseason, as Smart has said before, content to let his team do their talking with their helmets, while Jimbo Fisher gets the attention here during the offseason. Just keep your mind on that. A couple of other things very quickly. A lot of the news here this summer, whether it be some of the kind of the outside news, CDC yesterday, everything else, it's all going to be about the discussion of getting the college football world back to normal for the fall. Full stadiums, the energy around the stadium, the tailgating, and everything else that kind of goes along with that. Latest example of that, and I love this news because I love this game, the Egg Bowl, after a year in which it was not played on Thanksgiving. Now, you really couldn't do a lot of the Thanksgiving type stuff last year because you had to have that space available for COVID testing and everything else, but there is now news out there that the Egg Bowl is returning to Thanksgiving night. I think the Egg Bowl is arguably my favorite rivalry in the SEC, not counting, of course, anything for Georgia, because of how much these two schools hate each other. It's not prestigious like the Iron Bowl or what Michigan, Ohio State is or anything along those lines. It's just nasty and mean and intensity on both sides. The administration of the schools getting involved in this plenty of times. This is good stuff all the way around. Glad to have that back on Thanksgiving night. Another example that the world of college football is getting back to normal. And then finally, there's this. The Pac-12 has announced a new commissioner, and it's someone that is not familiar to most of the folks around college athletics. His name is George Klayokov. He is a executive most recently with one of the, I think it's MGM, one of the gambling, casino outfits there in Nevada. Obviously, there have been very close ties between the city of Las Vegas and the Pac-12 now for a while. The conference title game, the men's basketball tournament's been played there. A lot of sporting events, even though there's no team from Nevada in the Pac-12, there's been a lot of Pac-12 events taking place in Las Vegas. So the next step of hiring someone from Las Vegas to lead the Pac-12, I guess there's at least some clues that something like this could have been in the works because of how closely tied the league has been with this particular city. Now, I realize that there are not a lot of SEC fans who care about this one way or another, and I sort of understand why you don't, but I will kind of make one quick pitch here. I do believe that the Pac-12 being as bad as it is ultimately actually not that good for the SEC. That the sport does benefit when the entire country does pay attention. And there's been so much poor leadership in the Pac-12, frankly, overvaluing the worth of the Olympic sports and some of the stuff related to that at the expense of treating football as seriously as it should be treated. Not to say the other sports don't matter, just football matters more. And the Pac-12 has seemingly had its priorities out of whack for such a long time, had such poor, inept leadership, so easily swayed by whatever the prevailing mood of the day might be on any number of topics, that ultimately that weakness west of let's say the Colorado River, you're talking about, way out west here, that weakness for the sport ultimately threatened the sport. So if you bring in a business-minded guy, outsider to the league, who's going to reprioritize what truly matters for the Pac-12, even though Georgia fans don't like the Pac-12, SEC fans don't like the Pac-12 being a little bit better, I do, in a roundabout way, think actually benefits UGA, benefits the SEC over the long haul. It makes the worth of the college football playoff just slightly more viable, especially as we enter into kind of an expanded playoff world that could be on the horizon sooner rather than later. Now, it remains to be seen if this dude from MGM is going to be able to do that, but probably as good a chance him doing that as anybody else. One more quick thing before we let you go. Don't forget, my friends, secondchance.law can take good care of you when it comes to your criminal history. And many times you have these issues on your criminal record that prevent you from getting the job you want, or in some cases getting to live the place you'd like to live, and that can be really frustrating. Well, the good news is there are some Georgia laws now that give you a chance in some cases to restrict some of this off your criminal history. Confusing, like a lot of things with the law. This is confusing there as well. But at secondchance.law, they have a online quiz you can take. By answering the questions, you can determine your eligibility for something like this. So our folks there are making it very, very easy to understand. Also good dog people. One of the partners is a double dog, two-time UGA graduate, former Red Code, longtime listener of DawgNation Daily, and I love inviting you to support those who've supported us and who are proud of their connection to UGA. That is certainly true for secondchance.law, so please make sure you check them out today. And as we get ready to wrap up the week here, first of all, thank you for making it a fun week for us here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. I really appreciate that. Let me also say, let's go out in style here with a little Gator Hater roll call. In our golden shoe winner for today, it's Chad Buchanan. Funny stuff from Chad. You know, we obviously have Eddie, the official mascot of DawgNation Daily, on our desk every single day. And Chad kind of taking the original theme of Eddie, the blind squirrel, and turning it around here on Florida, putting the gator head on the squirrel here, saying even a blind squirrel can find that nut every once in a while. Obviously, a reference to the fact that Florida did kind of trip over itself, and won the SEC East a year ago. But Chad, me, and I would say most of you think that was a one-time occurrence, and Georgia rights the wrong of a year ago this October. In fact, we believe Georgia does that 169 days from now. That is our Gator Hater Countdown. Y'all have a great weekend. We'll see you tomorrow. Monday, DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. Talk to you then, everybody. And on video. Time now for our R.S. Andrews Cool Down. Air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric. R.S. Andrews can do all of that for you. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. You can find them online at rsandrews.com. Good to have you with us. Hope you're getting ready for a great weekend. My daughter's got a dance recital on Saturday, final soccer game on Sunday. We got another baseball game coming up at some point in time. But I am going to try to find an opportunity to kind of kick back, relax, and do some fun things. And so hopefully you are getting ready to do the same thing. I believe I started on YouTube yesterday, if I'm remembering correctly, so I'll go Facebook first here today. Bill Sanders says, now the Gator Hater Countdown, never a bad day to be one of those. No, I like that. Appreciate that there as well. And Bill Sanders also giving us an and on video. And I'm always happy to be able to do that too. Very funny line from Keith Folds. That's really funny. Jerry Popham, happy weekend to you. Hope you enjoy that. Kevin Cook bringing back the great Crisby Clark song. When you face the Georgia Bulldogs, you're going to feel the Bulldog bite. Boy, I tell you what, that reminds me of driving to games when I was a kid for sure. The legendary Crisby Clark. That song and Hunker Down, Harry Dogs. I used to love all that stuff. Steve Rogers, good stuff from him there as well. Let's see what else is going on. Keith Folds, we're glad to have you back. Brandon Griffin, completely agree with you, who says, best recruiting tool we have for 2022 and 2023 is a successful year on the field in 2021. And he says, a system where our kids can put up big stats, even more critical than a national championship, watershed year for UGA. Yeah, there is no doubt that at a certain point in time, there's a life cycle for recruiting, right? A new coach steps into a program. He can sell change in the culture, and people kind of want to be a part of that. He can also sell early playing time, and kids definitely like the idea of being a part of that. But there also comes that point where if you haven't changed the culture yet, are you really going to change the culture? And you've recruited to the point now where you probably don't have as much early playing time to offer recruits anymore. At that point in time, you better be able to sell them, come here and be a part of all the winning that we're doing, come here and be a part of all the development we're offering and getting you ready for the NFL. Otherwise, the recruiting pipeline is just going to die off. And I would say that for Georgia, we're not talking about a sort of a do or die championship or bust type year for 2021, but it is just a fact, as Brandon pointed out, that eventually it kind of slows down if you don't validate the promises you've been making in previous years. Recruits are just the first to know. They will just be able to kind of sniff it out. Is this a real offer in terms of what you're saying is going to happen for me when I get there? Is this a real thing? Is this going to actually happen? And they can just kind of tell. And I think that's a fair point. I do. William Perry. Very funny. Very funny. I don't know that Connor is quite as packed. This is written reference to what William Perry just wrote. I don't know that Connor is quite as into the Pac-12 as he once was. John Jared Bailey also saying that I can't stop talking about A&M. In fairness, this is like 90 seconds. Jimmy Durham, by the way, little inside information, says, I live in district with Bayer. Trust me, he's all dog. He has no problem saying no and talking trash to the state programs. Boy, you love to hear this from Jimmy. Special young man. When he arrives in Athens, UGA fans are in for a treat. Boy, that's good stuff. Jimmy, thanks for sharing that. Let's see what else. Oh, Chad Buchanan now in the top fan. So Chad was also our Golden Shoe winner today, too. So he's top fan and Golden Shoe. That's a big deal. Now, does Tennille give you a hat once you make that? Which I'm not saying she got to, be making hats for everybody, but that's pretty good. Oh yeah, by the way, baseball against Florida this weekend, and then next weekend, Diamond Dogs got full capacity against Ole Miss, right? So that's some good stuff. Brian Jones says A&M is my new Auburn. Boy, that's not nice. Brian, that's tough to hear. Boy, that's tough to hear. All right, let's see a couple more things over here. HR picking stuff on Lane Kiffin, saying the knock on Lane Kiffin is he starts quick his first year, then falls apart, eventually gets fired. Yeah, so HR, I talked about this a little bit on SEC Country Live this week, that this is a year in which, Lane Kiffin can do something about that reputation with what he does with Matt Corral. And obviously, if he has a big year with Matt Corral, then all of a sudden the idea that they could be a bigger player for Arch Manning, because there's no doubt the Manning family has close ties to Ole Miss, that if you could have the big year that seems possible for a guy like Matt Corral, all of a sudden your viability in a recruitment like Arch Manning, all of a sudden that would seem to go way up. So I am not as big a Lane Kiffin fan as some others seem to be. I think people have a tendency to confuse the attention that Kiffin cultivates with actual success on the field. And if you really compare it, the list of ways in which Lane Kiffin creates social media buzz is this high. The list of on-field accomplishments as a coach is probably about this low. And until there's a little bit more balance between those two things, I don't know how seriously I can take Lane Kiffin. But doing something big with Matt Corral this year would certainly be a step in that direction, even if it doesn't always result. Because, listen, there's only so much of a win-loss record you're going to be able to put together in the SEC West this year, just given how deep the league is. Y'all can mock me on the A&M thing if you want to, but that's a good team. I think LSU's a better team, and obviously Alabama's the defending national champion. So that right there is half the division. I mean, how many wins can a team like Ole Miss even hope to get there? And all of a sudden now you have to sweep the Arkansas, Mississippi States, Auburns of the world just to even be in contention for any kind of record that looks the least bit pretty. It's tough sailing in the SEC West, in other words. Jay Shipe says I was wrong about something. I wonder what I was wrong about. Could be anything. It could be anything. Nature Gator going with Frank here in a little bit of a debate. Let's see what else is going on. String Gene says, the fact that there are irrelevant conferences is why we must drop the conference championships from the playoff if we ever have a real playoff. So I guess, String Gene, the one argument I'd make against that is, even though I don't believe the Pac-12 is in any way going to win a national championship anytime soon, I guess the one thing I kind of like the idea of, and I'd be willing to tolerate a lesser conference champion making the playoff, I want to take power away from the committee. I want more playoff berths earned by automatic qualification because I don't want the committee getting a chance to pick everybody. I want to put some teams in the playoff and let the committee then pick from who's left and see who belongs. I think that's how you're going to ultimately get the deepest and best playoff. Because ultimately, if you have an 8 or a 10 or a 12-team playoff, all the way up to a 16-team playoff, not all those teams are going to be deserving of being in there, but more deserving teams will make the playoff than currently do right now. There'd be room for a Georgia from 2018 or a Texas A&M from last year, or if you want to say an Ohio State from 2017 who didn't make the playoff and maybe could have. There'd be room for more of those at-large teams capable of winning games in there. And so you may have some dud quarterfinal games, but hopefully you get better semifinal games, which you don't currently have right now. And the reason why the playoffs are blowouts right now is I just think the committee picks the wrong teams. So therefore, their inability to pick correctly, let's take power away from them in terms of making those picks. That'd be my argument on that. All right, let's see what else. Mark Abe says Kirby knows not to poke the bear. Yeah, I mean, Mark, you may be right about that, but I would say that Kirby also doesn't poke so-called bears that he does have an advantage over, right? I mean, Smart doesn't rile up Alabama with his words, but he also doesn't, flex when he's on top in a rivalry like Florida. Now, right now, Florida's the one that, holds the SEC East championship, but prior to that, given every chance to talk about all the ways in which Florida had beaten up, or I should say that Kirby Smart had beaten up on Florida, he kind of chose not to do that there either. So this isn't about some sort of outsized respect for Nick Saban in Alabama, although I'm sure he probably has respect for them. This is about that's just not Smart's way of going about his business. Now, in the case of Jimbo Fisher, who kind of got caught doing that, I actually don't think it's that big of a deal. I don't think it makes him less likely to win the game because he says he wants to win it. But one way or another, that's just not Smart's thing. So the attention going to somebody else in the SEC other than him, I think probably suits Kirby just fine, especially at a place like Georgia where you don't have to cultivate attention. I mean, there's some programs right now in the SEC that need to do something to cultivate attention. There are fewer people who seem to care about Auburn football now than used to. There are fewer people who seem to care about Tennessee football right now than used to. You're talking about first-year coaches there, probably South Carolina, certainly, especially given all the weird stuff that happened around Columbia as of late. There are some coaches in this league that probably do need to be doing something to stir things up because they are suffering from fan bases who just seem to have lost interest. Well, Georgia doesn't have to worry about that quite as much. Frank Patterson, very funny line. Let's see what else. Anything else on here we want to get to? Johnny Lester says the Dog front seven is going to be a wrecking crew, and I really believe, boy, it should be. I mean, man, how do you not produce a good front seven just given the fact that you got defensive linemen like Jalen Carter and obviously Jordan Davis leading the way and Trayvon Walker, and then depth at linebacker, inside guys like N'Kobe, outside guys like Nolan, Adam Anderson. How do you not get there from that? I just don't really know. Blind Squirrel Sports asks an interesting question. He says, we've heard how name, image, and likeness could help UG football, but I'm concerned that it could hurt what remains of Bulldogs basketball. Any thoughts on this? Go Dogs. I think it's interesting just from the standpoint of everything that Georgia football has going for it. The basketball team, unfortunately, has the opposite thing be true. Georgia football exists as a brand that even in those rare moments in history when the program wasn't winning very many games, there's still this belief that Georgia football matters and would be good again at some point in time in the future. And that's kind of what Georgia football has always had going for it. So many people care about it that there's always going to be a gravitational pull for recruits. Obviously, the same thing doesn't quite exist for basketball. Here's the thing I'll say. As far as how it's obviously going to impact football or basketball, I think it is still just too early to know. I really do, because I just still can't be quite so sure how much money is out there to be made by these athletes. I think the programs right now, and all programs, this is, SEC across the board, I think the programs right now love the idea that the recruits think they're going to cash in. And every single one of these recruits has their own logo, has his own logo now. I've told you before, just because you have a logo doesn't mean you have a brand. That's been proven true many, many times over. And so the programs are kind of feasting off the steam of name, image, likeness. Recruits are like, let me go this place. I'm gonna start cashing in. But for most college athletes, they will have little to no opportunity to make any money whatsoever. And they should know that for most college athletes, this opportunity is just not going to exist the way that you think it's going to. For the few that do, I think actually cashing in and making any kind of money to speak of is going to be harder work than you might realize. And I think that's important to note. And a lot of this is going to have to be done through social media because there's just not an endless supply of TV commercials available to anybody. I mean, you don't see – think about like Grady Jarrett. Grady Jarrett plays for the Atlanta Falcons. He's one of the best defensive linemen in the NFL. How many TV commercials do you even see Grady Jarrett doing? There are guys already in the NFL or in the NBA. I mean, Trae Young, I think I've seen him do a TV commercial before, but I mean, it's not like Trae Young playing for the Hawks, well known as he is, focal point of NBA Twitter, social media, and everything else. It's not like Trae Young's doing like an endless array of TV commercials. There's just not an endless appetite for this kind of stuff. So I am skeptical of name, image, and likeness because I think a lot of the people who push it are pushing it because they like bringing chaos into college sports. But ultimately, I still can't be so sure that there's going to be all that much money to be made by anybody who gets involved in this. So as far as it hurting basketball because other guys get a chance to make more money other places, I mean, honestly, how different is that from what's already going on, I guess? I don't know. But it's a good question, though, Blind Squirrel. I think it definitely is. Here's a good question from Frank Patterson. We got to get ready to go after this. He says, how about an early rushing yards total for a week 1 win versus Clemson? Boy, that's fun to think about. Can Georgia go 250 on the ground against Clemson? Boy, that'd be fun. I still think if Georgia wins the national championship, big total in rushing yards is still a big part of that. Travis Etienne had 1,600 rushing yards for Clemson in 2018. Clyde Edwards-Helaire had 1,400 rushing yards for LSU in 2019. Before you get to his impact in the passing game, he was on the ground for more than 1,400 yards. Najee Harris had more than 1,400 yards for Alabama a year ago. Even in this age of huge passing attacks, quarterbacks leading their team towards national championships, man, you have still got a big role for the running games for these recent national champions. Last 4 running backs to be taken in the first round, 4 over the course of the last 3 years. That's all we've had in football. 4 first-round running backs in the last 3 years, but all 4 won a national championship while they were in college. Brandon Griffin says, I think the UGA Clemson game is going to come down to turnovers. First game of the season, a lot of jitters, mistakes, fumbles, interceptions. I think JT's experience will be huge in this game. Boy, that's interesting to think about. For a lot of these guys, also the potential of playing in front of a full stadium for the first time in a long time. I say this half jokingly, but do they still remember how to do that? They've gotten used to the stadiums being much quieter. The pumped-in noise does nothing to really rival what actual crowd noise feels like because of the weird thing about the fake noise last year was the way that certain stadiums would turn it up and turn it down. So it's almost like they turn it up a little too early, they turn it down a little too late, and it just never felt real. It was just always very obvious how fake it was, whereas it's the spontaneous cheers of a real crowd, seeing something happening, reacting quickly in the moment, building to a crescendo as you get louder and louder and louder before a big third down play. There is just no recreating a true real crowd. For those of you that watch wrestling, you can always tell the fake crowd, right? It's like a real crowd, the way that it responds to the good guy, the bad guy, cheering who they want to cheer for, booing who they want to boo. You can just tell a real crowd. The fake crowd that matches what the public relations team wants you to cheer for. It's just never the same kind of thing. And if you've ever watched WWE, you can obviously tell that. It was very similar to that in football a year ago. Very similar. All right, a couple more Facebooks. We're going to get ready to go. William Perry says, is anybody to the Pac-12 as they once were? Going back to a comment from a little earlier. No, I'd say that's a league that's fallen on hard times. But I do truly believe that a little firmer footing out west does protect the, I'm going to use a bigger word than I should, the efficacy of the sport overall. Bill Sanders, on the subject of how guys are going to make money, says it's going to be more local promotions, autograph signings, appearances, things like that. And that's probably true. You will have to have someone who manages that stuff for you. And the actual act of signing autographs can get pretty tedious after a while. But I'm sure a lot of them will look forward to doing that. Scotty Gorp says, I hope we get a chance to see a second quarterback because of the score. Can you imagine? Week 1 against Clemson, Georgia gets to play a backup quarterback, human victory cigar because they're up so big. Boy, that'd be a fun thing. Calvin Sanders on the subject of the Nick Saban video. The video response to Jimbo Fisher was indeed very good. Saban, when he wants to, can be a pretty funny guy. All right, let's see. Tennille Calvino, like my use of the word efficacy. Yeah, I'm not very well educated, but every now and then I'll pull out a word. Every now and then I will. DeMarco Thomas, did you see the video when Nick Saban and some players ran out of gas on the boat? That's from a couple of years ago. Am I right about that? I feel like I do remember that. Pretty funny stuff. I guess, of course, I almost felt like I was the same way this week. I sort of get the impression that the gas thing is kind of getting back more to normal now. I mean, at least it is around my house. When I tell you this, there was no gas around my house anywhere for a couple of days this week. And, driving in today, the main exit, like right where I live, the two big, gas stations on both sides of the highway, they both had gas back. And it wasn't like the line was like crazy long to get it. It was all the pumps were full, but the lines themselves weren't crazy long. Do y'all get the impression that the gas thing's kind of getting back to normal a little bit? Randy Hall says, going back to the 92 team from yesterday, don't forget about Damon Evans. That's right. Damon Evans, I'm a Gainesville guy. Damon Evans is a hometown guy for me. So I know that Damon kind of has a little bit different reputation at UGA now than he once did, but those of us who are from Gainesville were always very proud that Evans became UGA athletic director. It was a very big deal. Matt Rukavina, boy, I don't think I could do those. You're giving me some bigger words than I think I could probably use. Bob Collins says it won't be very long until boosters are coming up with ads just for the purpose of playing players. Maybe so, but even within like the booster realm, I mean, we're still talking about, I sort of have a hard time imagining that. I don't really know what I think is going to happen, but this idea of, hey, I'm a big booster guy, so I'm going to pay, the 5-star recruit a ton of money. I'm going to put a full-page ad in the paper or TV, radio, sponsor right here on DawgNation Daily, whatever it is. I just have a hard time imagining that's really going to happen. Now, maybe I'm being naive, and maybe that's exactly what's going to happen. But either through restrictions in the laws and rules or the fact that even these rabid boosters, I mean, it's not like money grows on trees. There's just only – and, this money's going to be taxed and everything else. I on both sides, I just sort of wonder if the actual impact is going to be as big as we have it pictured in our imagination. But as I said before, there's a chance I'm also just very naive to all of that. And maybe that's exactly what's going to happen. Last comment, we're going to get ready to go. Anything else? Johnny Lester, thank you for the kind words. Appreciate that. Stephen Wainwright asks a really good question. He says, what game in Athens this year? This is a good question, Stephen. What game in Athens this year is the game you just can't wait to see? And obviously the caveat to all of this is that the Georgia home schedule is not as attractive this year as it will be in future years. So I guess you're thinking about, is it the Arkansas game? Is that the biggest home game Georgia's going to play this year? Because obviously, Clemson's a neutral. South Carolina does come in, but that's a new coach. You hope that's not a very close game. Arkansas, I wonder how good the Kentucky game ends up being. There's some people who are going to talk up Mark Stoops a little bit. Y'all talk about the kind of, I guess, small biases I get for certain SEC coaches. The rest of the media does that way more than I do. In the same way that a lot of media used to love Dan Mullen was at Mississippi State, the guy who kind of takes on that mantle of, boy, he does more with less, that guy is Mark Stoops. Mark Stoops is a media darling with a lot of the SEC local, regional writer types. So you wonder if Stoops is good enough to make Kentucky a game worth mattering in Athens. Missouri, much the same way. So there you go. I guess I'd probably say, for me, it's the Arkansas game, but the possibility exists that either Kentucky or Missouri could be somewhat interesting, especially Missouri the week after Florida. I don't know. It's kind of weird. It's like, I mean, I obviously know you only get so many chances to be inside Sanford Stadium, so I want those games to matter, but it's like I don't want them to matter too much because I don't want Georgia to have to play some extra tough game that's not currently on my radar. But that is a very good question. Very, very good question. All right, let's get ready to wrap up today. Let me remind you to also check out the Atlanta Journal-Constitution online, ajc.com. You can get all kinds of updates on what's going on around the city of Atlanta there for that. I mentioned a little earlier that I sort of get the impression that the gas thing's kind of getting back to normal a little bit, and I was asking some of you if you kind of felt the same way that I felt about that. Obviously, the AJC's got reporting on that, about what's going on there. Also, big things going on this weekend. You can find out about all the exciting events around Atlanta. Update on the CDC recommendations from yesterday about kind of the end of mask wearing for those who are vaccinated, at least according to the CDC. I'm going to let y'all figure that out for yourself, but that was out there as of yesterday. Pretty interesting stuff all the way around. So check it out all online, Atlanta Journal-Constitution at ajc.com. Hope you all have a great weekend. Thank you for being here for R.S. Andrews Cool Down. Don't forget to check them out for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. Find them online, rsandrews.com. They'll do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. They'll show up. They'll take care of you today. Y'all have a great day, everybody. Great weekend. I'll see you back here Monday. DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. I'll look forward to talking to you then.